So blind tasting championships, actually, it was introduced, the competition was introduced close to 10 years now, I think. I stand to be corrected because JV knows even better. I think, yeah, 8 to 10 years already in running. But then South Africa is the only country in Africa which has been going there pretty much more than any other, or I'll say more than half of the times when this competition was actually introduced. So in 2015, I went for I tried to do the blind testing with Team South Africa here in Cape Town, and I did very well, to be honest. Then I was selected to be in Team South Africa, and I went to France. So when I was there, I really liked everything which I saw, and it was my very first time to be in Europe. So imagine the feeling, and I was very, it was amazing. It was such a great experience. So when I came back, I thought of really having Team Zimbabwe. Like we have really some very good testers, really good sommeliers, even wine enthusiasts. It was, remember, this blind tasting competition is not only meant for sommeliers only, or even winemakers only. Anyone can test wine. I believe anyone can do blind testing. And you can actually you'll be surprised that you get maybe the best wine tester who is not even working on the floor, or who's not working in the cellar. Things like that happens, you know. So then we came together as sommeliers who in Cape Town, and we chose 4 guys, including myself. I was the captain and founder as well. Then we went to France. The competition at first was in Burgundy. Yes, it was in Burgundy. Yeah, it was in Burgundy. So that's when we came 24th out of 25 countries. So you only managed to beat Italy. So, but we were very happy with the opposition, because we didn't come last after all. Then we went again in 2019. That's when we were number 14. So we did quite well in 2019. So yeah, 2018. So it was 17 and 18. 2018, yeah. So that's really how it is. So we were being asked to test wines blindly, but this, I mean, the wine could come in a decanter, then they pour in the glass in front of you. So you won't be able to see the bottle itself, thereby really not knowing what you're having. Of course, you can see the color, but you won't know where the wine was made, who is the wine producer, among other things, you know, not even mentioning all, the grape variety itself. So yeah, so you're gonna have to, they give you time, I think 7 minutes, to go through the wine and to lay down your answer or your answers. So that's basically how we did it.
Now, do you have any tips? Because it's always so hard for me blind tasting. Like I always, because I'm very judgmental, so I think I start making these judgments even before I get to the final like judgment. Is there any advice that you can give us as students? You know, like how often should we be blind tasting? Is there any way or tips that you can give us for blind tasting?
Well, yes, I mean, practice makes perfect, they say. I mean, you're gonna have to keep on practicing. If you don't practice, even if you wanna get like proper match fitness, you're gonna have to exercise or practice very well and very much. So blind testing, you're gonna have to do it even at home, and with your partner, with your family members, with your friends or workplaces. Please, those who can actually test alcohol at work should be able to actually put that into practice. And when you get your glass of wine in front of you, approach it with an open mind, right? You're gonna have to be completely blank, even if you can see that, even if you see that is white wine, try to approach it with really and like very blank mind completely. In a way that if you're gonna have to analyze the color, the nose, the palate, and your conclusion, you won't be biased. because the moment you see that golden kind of like copper hue, you may think that, oh, it might be a wooded Chardonnay. Don't rush to conclusion. Nose, taste, conclude, then always go with your guts. Like your first gut is actually the answer. Don't complicate things. Like really be simple and take it easy.
Are there any varietals that are harder to evaluate than other varietals? Like, for example, is Syrah harder than Cabernet, or, are they pretty much it just depends?
Well, it depends on the style. It also depends on the style. I mean, obviously there are grape varieties which are kind of like really difficult to separate. You're gonna have to use your knowledge now. In this case, like you can get two grape varieties, like two different grape varieties with like similar characteristics. I would like to say. Say you have Blacc Board and Gewürztraminer. Those two grape varieties really gives same flavor profile, same fruit components as well, but then they kind of like really they're not the same in some way. Like it depends again with the style, but then you find out that one might have a little bit more acidity than the other. One might be a little bit spicier than the other. All those things we're going to have to put into consideration. But yes, there are grape varieties which can actually confuse you, and yeah, you can easily miss the answer because of that.
Nice. I mean, that's a very good tip. I think the takeaway that I got was we just need to start drinking more wine. Because I've never had that one. I never had that one grape that you just talked about. So Gewürztraminer, yes, I've had Gewürztraminer, but then you said it was called Bush. What did you say it was called?
The Blacc. So Blacc is in South Africa. We have Ciderbeck. They make 100% Blacc. I can't remember of someone else. There's someone actually who's making dessert wine out of Blacc. It was some guy from Swartland, and I tried it like about 5 years ago. It was really good. So it's a German grape variety actually, which was actually introduced in Randesaka, Germany, and it's a cross between, I think it's Trollinger and is it Savannah? I can't really remember, but I think I'm gonna have to double check on that one. It should be Trollinger or Sheva Grosser and Savannah. But again, I'm gonna have to check that as well.
Yeah. Zunga.
Okay, so let's see. I am going to unmute everyone. And if you have questions right now, this is probably a really good time to answer the question. Does anybody have any questions?
Hi, Joseph.
How are you doing? Yes. How are you?
Hey, Joseph.
I'm okay, bro.
My question is, I know on the floor, you mentioned that there's a lot of the etiquettes you have to go through when you're trying to find out what the people should drink. Are you noticing any trends at the moment, especially in South Africa, of people shifting from a certain grape variety or style of wine going to a certain direction? Is there anything you have noticed that probably makes your job a bit more difficult or different?
Oh yes, of course. Thank you for that question. I mean, I've been seeing a lot of things, really different things, I would say. When I started really studying wine, that's say 5 years ago, 6 years ago, thereabout, the Chardonnays, which we had then in South Africa, were these big, bold, battery, and very oaky Chardonnays, which we normally have now, which is probably a trend in some parts of America. But now that have changed now. I mean, it's very it's kind of like really strange to hear someone asking you if you have any like really rich, big, kind of like dark Chardonnay, which you like a golden dark Chardonnay, which they would want to drink. So people have moved away. I would want to say people have moved away from too much oak Eastern Chardonnays to lighter style wines, like really minimum intervention, less oak, and all that stuff. And again, I would want to also emphasize that in South Africa, we also don't use a lot of American oak anymore. It's mostly, or 90% is French oak, or maybe Yugoslavian oak on some other parts of the world, and less American oak. But yes, people have moved away from those big fat Chardonnays. Then Sauvignon Blanc, with the introduction of fermenting or maturing Sauvignon Blanc in oak, people are starting really to enjoy Sauvignon Blanc. I personally, I'm not really a big fan of Sauvignon Blanc, but now I enjoy really wooded Sauvignon Blanc the most. They're really, really good. And some of them are quite skin contact and all that stuff. They're really, really palatable. They're really enjoyable. They're really, really good. So those things actually made me also change my mind. Both Sauvignon Blanc used to be like quite green, peppery, from asparagus, whatever it is, and light, high acidity, you know, plushy and all that stuff. But now it's more kind of like good wine, which is in harmony to drink. I don't know if I answer you correctly.
Absolutely, I do agree with trends as probably a challenge for a sommelier designing a wine menu, because what's in fashion today seems to be moving very fast. It's quite a fluid industry now, that you pick up this beautiful wine and you think people are going to like it, and all of a sudden they are shifting. Then my second last question, maybe, and then others get a chance, is what do you think has been, we celebrated social media a lot, or internet. What do you think are the challenges? Luckily, you didn't mention, that used to be my job. So I know sometimes we charge ridiculous amounts in the La Columbe wine list, those who know it, you've been there, that sometimes you're like, wow, is that the bottle of wine I went to taste it in Stellenbosch? Now it's on the wine menu at La Columbe, it's highly priced, which also sometimes could be misleading for other young sommeliers who doesn't understand why the pricing has been structured this way. They will take their wine in a little cafe, all of a sudden they charge these ridiculous prices. Now with technology that I can check a bottle of wine, how much it costs, then I come to La Colombe, it's costing 1,700 Rand. How do you navigate that? Because it must have been, during my time when I was there, it was easier. Technology was there, but it wasn't that great that everybody could just check it. Now I can just scan it, and then I can ask you questions and say it's ripping people off. What advice would you give to a young sommelier who is starting in this industry, who is going to get a big responsibility to curate a wine menu, and all they think the sommelier is a flashy, prized, well-decorated wine menu? How do you navigate this area in this day and age?
That's a very, very interesting question, I must say. And it's really, well, I would want to say that it's such a huge subject to talk about. Remember, sommeliers, they are workers, right? We get to be employed to do our job. So the employer, he has to pay us really well. That's one thing for sure again. But now establishments really charge their prices differently. The markups are, they can vary according to the establishment. Of course, wine bottle in a wine list from a starred Michelin restaurant, like one star Michelin star, is completely different from a 3-star Michelin restaurant, I want to think. Yeah, so at La Colombe, the wine prices are a little bit high, that's true, but then there are so many things to consider. I use Zauto glasses. Zauto glass is 700 bucks, right? 700 Rand. Let me mention Rand, because in New Zealand, you don't use Rand there. or some of the probably participants are in America or some other parts of the world. So Zauto glass, I'm buying Zauto glass for it around 700 rand, one glass. So glass come to play. Then my service as a sommelier, right, needs to be paid as well. So there are so many things really to consider. Honestly, I mean, the cellar itself, to have like a aircon running 24/7, that's electricity being paid, and maintenance. Like, there is a lot really to consider. All the detergents which you use to wash the glasses, the guys who polish the glasses, they also needs to be paid. So it's quite a it's a huge. I would say it's not easy to break that down. But then for big restaurants, obviously, we charge a little bit more price, because we know that when you're sitting at La Colombe, you're gonna actually enjoy your glass of wine with someone who is well or kind of like educated to explain or walk you through the wine which you're enjoying. The service itself is really important, and it's very expensive. And the glass which you're using is also quite expensive than the wine. So there are so many things to consider. I don't know if you answered. And again, to the upcoming sommeliers, they should just keep on studying. And obviously, you can't just finish your studies and work at La Colombe. Of course, you're going to have to start from somewhere else for you to be in higher places. But again, never lose hope, and don't be intimidated with this big wine list which we have like at La Colombe. As soon as you join La Colombe, the day you're going to be joining La Colombe, that big wine list will be so small in front of you, because you'll be knowing everything. I don't know if Cassius is answered.
Absolutely. I deliberately asked the questions so that they could benefit also somebody who has not been in this journey. I was thrown in the deep end. You know how I came into this. I was thrown in the deep end from where I came from, Rebecca, still right into La Colombe. That was pretty much something you would like.
Uh-oh, I'm getting feedback from somewhere. Not sure. So I just put everybody on mute just because I was getting feedback. We have a couple questions that are in the text message, so I'll unmute the people so that they can actually ask the questions themselves. But I also wanted to make a point about markups in the restaurant. I think that a good thing to remember too is you're going for the experience, right? So you can sit at home and you can have a glass of wine, or you can go to a restaurant like La Colombe and have somebody who studied wine, who spent money on education, tell you about these wines and help you pair it with the meal. So that's just something to keep in the back of your heads too. Let's see, how about we go to Mobaneg Wines, and I'll unmute you so that you can ask your question that you typed. Hey, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm good. You have to tell me your name one more time. I'm sorry, I forgot it from the last time.
Okay, so Mobaneg Wine Club is in Joburg. My name is Andrea.
Hey, Andrea. All right, I can't wait to visit you guys when this is all over. So can you ask your question that you typed in the text? Because it's kind of hard sometimes for us to read the text and then look at the screen too.
No problem. Hi, Joseph. I wanted to find out what is the testing process during the South African Wine Tasting Championships, the national leg? Because I know on the provincial level, they do like blind tasting of South African wine. So I don't know about the national leg, whether it's only blind tasting and whether they mix South African and wines from other regions of the world as a way to kind of get the best, or Team South Africa or Team Zimbabwe, for instance.
Wait, I'm sorry, Joseph. Sorry. Okay, I'm on it. Go ahead.
Okay. Andrea, thanks for asking your question. I'll try to answer it in a way that you will be able to get the answer for local and international. By this I mean regional and also international. So South African Wine Tasting Championship, which is actually run by Jean-Vincent Redon, always have a Joburg leg, Durban, and Cape Town, all right? So in one room, there will be wine makers, I would say, or any representative from a wine producer. Normally maybe 10, 15, or 20, depends on how many are being actually invited. So you will be testing all those wines and writing down your notes, your own notes, right? So there will be 7 or 12 wines in the tasting room where you're going to be doing your blind testing. So which is completely different room from the one which you just walk around and test all those wines. And the answers will be in that big room. All the wines which are going to be tested for your exam will be coming from that big room whereby everyone will be testing freely, right? So you're gonna have to have a memory. You're gonna have to have your notes written down in a way that if you really happen to have that wine for the second time, it just triggers that, oh, I actually tried this wine, and you can actually go through your notes, then you'll say, oh, it's Mosi Chenin Blanc 2018, which I tried earlier. You know what I mean? So yeah, my advice is test as much as you can in that big room where everyone is. Then when you are in the other room, where the exam room, try again to approach all the wines with like open, blank minds, okay? So that you can kind of like really start afresh. But then obviously there are some really easy. I don't want to use the name easy because my easy is not Tuanni's easy. There are some really good varieties which just shout or scream themselves like, here I'm Sauvignon Blanc because of ABCD. So those, don't spend more time on them. If you know that it's Sauvignon Blanc, just go for it. Put your vintage and your possible producer. Then move on to the next one before you run out of time. Then when you're overseas, they also again bring, I think, 12 wines from 8 or 9 different countries, because France always bring in 2 or 3 wines. Then the other wines, well, at some stage we had Chateau Moussa from Lebanon, and Cabernet Sauvignon from Australia, I think, and Riesling from Germany. So they just pick wines from any country. And we had Chenin Blanc from South Africa. It was Fruitsam and Jetsam, Chris Allied, and luckily that one he got it right. So yeah, so it's really difficult and a bit different in terms of if you testing locally and internationally. It's really like international is more painful and stressful than locally, because locally you can think of creation, you can think of Avondale, you can think of like Gumbo wines, you can think like if it's made in South Africa. But then when you're there, it's very difficult because there will be only probably one wine from your country, sometimes nothing. So you're gonna have to have a better knowledge and understanding about international wines.
Okay. Very good advice. Winston, I think Winston has a question. Winston, are you still, can you hear us?
Oh yes, I can hear you. Sorry about my my camera's off. It's a little bit colder in Durban, so I'm in blankets right now. Okay, anyway, so I wanted to ask Joseph about blind testing. Of late, I've seen guys that are now using black wine glasses so that you cannot see what's inside. Is it something proper, or it compromises your testing ability?
Well, the word proper, it can be proper to anyone who is using it or anyone who just implemented that, like myself. At La Columbe, I have that glass. There's always black glass in your pairing menu. And it normally goes with tuna La Columbe, which is our signature dish. So I think it's quite fun. I wouldn't want to have that in a competition though, because it really happens to mislead me in many ways, because sometimes you benefit a lot by just seeing the color of the wine, like I mentioned earlier. So in this case, the glass will be completely dark or black. You can't even see what's inside, right? So it's difficult for one to pick if it's white wine or red wine. But again, I would want to do that on a fun side of it, not really for a competition. I don't think it's ideal to use that black glass in a competition. You can test yourself at home with that, but come on, I mean, it's really tough to pick one in that Blacc glass. It really defeats you big time.
Defeats the purpose. All right. So Joseph, we have another question from Carol. So Carol, I am going to unmute you and then you can talk to Joseph.
Thank you so much, Tuanni. Hi, Joseph. Very nice to see you again. My question is regarding decanting. I'm the wine steward at a restaurant in Johannesburg, and I have two separate wine cellars, one for red wine and one for white wine. And often I decant the red wines for the guest at the table. But then during summer, when it's sort of 36, 37 degrees, and I leave the decanter on the table for half an hour, the wine loses its temperature. Can you take that decanter away from the table and put it back in the cellar to continue chilling? Or do you leave it then at whatever temperature it's reduced to in that half hour before serving for the customer?
Hi, good to see you again, and thank you very much for joining and for your question as well. That's a very good question for those who work on the floor. The best advice I would give is listen, wine serving etiquette really has to apply to any restaurant, regardless of where you are, whether you're at La Columbe or you're at Aubergine or you're in Joburg, at any restaurant, decanting is decanting, right? But then probably sometimes the facilities won't allow you to do some other things which will actually add an extra hand, or should I say, to add a bit of well, in some restaurants like La Columbe, I have a huge cellar, so it's an advantage to me than a restaurant which doesn't have a huge cellar. So decanting wine at the table, yes, that's the perfect way to do it. But then I'm not saying right on top of the table. You can use we don't use gueridons anymore, but there's always a stand, like wine stand next to the table or something like that. You can decant your wine there as long as it's actually in front of the guest. So because you're gonna have to show or do everything in front of the guest to show authenticity, because you can't really decant their wine in the cellar where they can't see you. What if, I know it's not really, it's not gonna happen, but what if you actually throw something else which is not their wine? So guests always have this mentality. So you're gonna have to decant the wine in front of the guest. And if you really know that the room is not temperature controlled, like there's no aircon in the room, in the restaurant, you can easily ask them. The guests always want to kind of like really, they want to be asked. They are human, they are just like us, you know what I mean? And it's always good to give them best advice possible because they are spending money and they want the best experience. So the moment you see that the wine is losing temperature or it's actually, it's getting warmer, you can go back to them and say, look, because of the temperature change in the room, the wine is now warming up a little bit. It's different temperature from the wine which was in the cellar. Do you mind if I can take your decanter back into the cellar so that you can actually maintain the same temperature, we just say 17 or 18 degrees Celsius? That's if it's red wine. So I would want to advise asking the guests to take the wine back to the cellar if you can, than to just leave the wine on the stand, then it gets warmer and warmer. They won't really enjoy the last sips of the wine.
Thank you very much.
No, you're welcome.
Do we have any more questions for Joseph? Anybody? Just raise your hand and I will unmute you. Okay, go ahead, Carol. You're on the mic, so you can go.
Sorry, I just wanted to find out that there's various different institutions where you can study to achieve your sommelier qualification. Is there one in particular that you would advise? I have started and I'm probably about 2 modules away from finishing, but I would just like to have a little bit of insight from a professional som to be able to find out what you would recommend. Where would you gain the most exposure, the most experience that you could take with you internationally?
Lovely. Thank you very much for this question. This question really reminds me of a friend of mine who asked me about champagne and champopo, mostly in Joburg. MCC, which is Method Cape Classic, is actually considered as champagne in Joburg for some weird reason. Not only Johannesburg. I was in Zim. I often go back home, And if we're drinking cover or Prosecco, they have actually Prosecco, most Proseccos there, and some South African MCCs. They were like, oh, would you like a glass of champagne? Then then I look at them like, no, can I see the bottle firstly? Then they show me, well, it's Steenbeck Brut, 1682. Then I try to tell them, educate them, this is not champagne, it's Method Cape Classic, made in South Africa. It's unique to South Africa. You understand what I mean? You can't make Method Cape Classic in Zimbabwe or in New Zealand. You can't make champagne in South Africa. Champagne can only be found in Champagne region in France. So the question which you just asked me now, it's difficult to kind of like really judge. Depends on where you are, I must say. And I kind of like lost the point now because I wanted to stress 2 points at one go. Refresh my memory again, like briefly. Sorry about that.
Just no problem at all. Thank you. Just to find out from you which institution you would recommend to complete your sommelier's qualification.
Got it. Right. So the reason why I mentioned about champagne is they are so many institutions which we have now globally, and they're all very, very good. But then you know what you want to do. You will know what you want to be. Do you want to be a salesperson? Do you want to be a sommelier on the floor? Do you want to be just a wine enthusiast? You choose. So your choices will actually lead you to the proper institution. I'll break it down again. So WSET, this is my own opinion, and please don't take it anywhere else. It's just like an advice which I'm giving you. WSET is amazing, really good. It actually opens your mind on a broader spectrum, and you really get to understand and know wines of the world, right? But then it doesn't teaches one to be a sommelier on the floor. That's for sure. You can have your WSET level 4, but if I give you a decanter and I give you a bottle there to open and charge to the guest, trust me, the person with WSET level 4 or diploma might not really score all the 7 etiquettes, which is actually wanted or needed on the floor. So WSET is amazing. If you really want to know wines of the world, then there's Sommelier Academy. I think it's run by Jean-Vincent Ridon. That does both the service side and also so practical in theory, they do that. Then we have also Cape One Academy. That's where I started, really. I know everyone is really dissing or looking down on Cape One Academy, but that's where we all started. And it's still functioning. So one can actually start with Cape One Academy. Then we also have Som 101 does the same thing. Then Court of Master is one which I highly recommend. When you've done your WSET level 2 or Som Academy or SASA sommelier course, now go to Court of Master. Try to do the introductory and the certification. That really helps. Even if you have the introductory certificate, you will be doing really amazingly good on the floor because they teach you everything. Is that are you answered?
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just if you have got time, Tuan, just to add on that, it's nice to see Prosper there. It's nice to see you guys because it was a journey. Sommelier, I can stress that further. Sommelier, you cannot be a sommelier overnight. It is a process you have to go through. It's not an event. So what I'm trying to explain is you're gonna need any opportunity you have to read or study. It might not look very relevant in the time, but that knowledge you have in your bank, it's your wealth. It is important to take you to the next level. It will help you open another door. I do agree when Joseph is touching here and there because you don't want to kind of like say that doesn't do better than that, because at the end of the day, you're getting knowledge. It is important. Whatever situation or environment you are, as long as it can provide you with the information you need and make you a better som on the floor, please go for it. It doesn't matter who is giving it to you, as long as it's relevant and it can help you to prosper in your field, sir.
Correct. Thank you very much for that, Cassius.
Yes, thank you. That was all very helpful tips. Let's see. So I think we're gonna go to Andrea. She had a question, so I'm going to unmute her. Are you ready for your question?
Yeah, for sure. Keep them coming. I'm also going to ask them, when are they going to list Mosi wines in Joburg? But it's a story for another day.
I think her question was, what's the best way to access international or great quality wines from the rest of the world? And I know personally, for me, coming from Los Angeles to international city, there's so many different wines from all over the world. In Cape Town, it's a little bit difficult to find like wines from the rest of the world. Do you guys have any tips, you or Cassius, on how to find these wines and taste them?
Well, my advice is, firstly, one needs to understand that we are a little bit isolated. I would want to say, like in terms of wine side, we're far from Europe, we're far from States, we're far from Australia, and we are actually far from New Zealand. So we don't get to have more international wines here in South Africa. We have a bit of French wines, a fair number of French wines, but then again, they always come with a price tag. So the best way to introduce yourself into these wines, I remember very well, I remember very well when I was, I think with Cassius a while ago, we used to look for these wines in Checkers. Checkers used to have a shelf where you get these cheapish wine, or inexpensive wine, let me put it that way, from Spain, from Italy, and all that stuff. So my advice is, after lockdown, try to go to Checkers. They always have these shelves where you can get inexpensive wine or affordable wines from all over the world. But if your pockets permits, you can go to Great Domains, you can go to Wine Cellar. There you can get even Chateau d'A, Camp Petrus, and all that stuff. But I know for a fact that those come with, really, they can cost an arm and a leg. But the best way possible to access them is to go via Checkers or these wine stores.
Good question. All right, any more questions for Joseph? This is your chance. It's not every day you get to talk to one of the top somms in the world. All right, well, I don't have any more questions. Does anybody else have any more questions? All right, so this is the part where we thank you, Joseph. Thank you so much for joining us. It was such a pleasure to talk to you. It was so much good information. We're gonna finish with our study group. So if you wanna stay on the call and you wanna talk about how to evaluate wines, that's what we're gonna talk about. And we have another hour left in our study group. And Joseph, do you have any last comments or anything else you'd like to say?
Well, obviously, I would want to say thank you very much, you Tuanni, for organizing this, and thank you very much for everyone who actually attended. And also, please stay safe, and let's all adhere to what the authorities actually ask us to do, like staying at home and only go to the shops if you really need to buy groceries. You know, there's always lights after the tunnel. We will all smile and celebrate after this lockdown. And again, please try to drink as much of local wine as possible, because these wineries need us. So the more you drink, and see, I'll show you my fridge is almost empty. Yes, that's great. So obviously, in some way or the other, we are going to replenish our stock. So by replenishing our stock, we'll be actually promoting again all these wineries. So please, let's try to drink local for now.
Yes, that's a very good point. Drink local. Thank you so much, Joseph. It has been a wonderful pleasure to have you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And you can stay for the rest of our meeting if you want, or you can take off. It's totally your choice, but we are now going to get started with part 2 of our study group, everybody. All right, so everybody have their pens, and are you guys ready? I'm going to unmute everybody so we can have this discussion, and it can be like a group thing. Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you very much.
All right. All right, so we are going to talk about, so like in this study group, what we're doing is we're basically following the WSET Level 2 study guide. And so in the study guide, I think it's chapter 3, they talk about the systematic approach to tasting wine. So that's what we're going to talk about today. It's like how to evaluate wine, how to taste wine systematically. And I think it's really important to understand the reason that we do this, right? So the reason that we want to do this is so that wine becomes this international, universal language that everybody is speaking. So when you talk about a wine and you say a wine is pale, we all understand what pale means, right? Or if you say the color is intense, we all understand what intense is. So that's the reason that you want to have this systematic approach. And depending on what wine school you're actually in, they all have different grids with different ways to systematically approach it. But I think the WSET way is very basic, so we're just going to talk about that today. How many people are familiar with the systematic approach to tasting wine? Just raise your hand. Yeah, okay, perfect. All right, so I do this, and when I do it, I usually because I teach wine tasting classes, and I usually just talk about like the 5 S's, right? You want to see the wine, you want to smell the wine, you want to sip the wine. You want to swirl the wine, you want to sip the wine, right? But theirs is a little bit more formal than that. So you want to first look at the color. And so when you look at the color, you're looking for the intensity, the actual color of the wine, and then you're looking at the color around the rim of the wine, right? And for the color, you go to the intensity, and you can go with pale, medium, or deep. And so that's kind of like looking at the pigment, right? So when you look at the color, is it pale that you can see straight through it for a red wine? For a white wine, is it pale where it almost looks like transparent? It has absolutely no color. And then for medium, it's gonna have a little bit more pigmentation. It's gonna look more like a color that you would see in a Crayola box. And then for deep is definitely going to be a color that you would see in a Crayola box, right? Because the color is going to be very intense. You're going to definitely be able to say, okay, that's yellow, or that's gold, or that's ruby, or that's purple, because the color is just so intense and it's so deep. So those are the terms that you would use: pale, medium, or deep. And then you want to look at the actual color of the wine, right? So for white wine, you have different descriptors like, is it lemon, is it gold, or is it amber, right? So lemon, gold, or amber, and the color gives you a good indication of like where the wine might come from, what grape varietal it might be. For red wine, it's gonna be purple, ruby, and garnet and tawny, right? So it's gonna be purple, like Zinfandels are usually a little bit more purple, right? Ruby is probably the standard color for red wines, right? And then garnet is gonna be the color that you have for a red wine that's actually aged. And then tawny is gonna be a red wine that's aged that might have a little bit of oxidation to it, might be a little bit like garnet, but like brick, like brown, a little bit brown. So that's for the red wine. And then for the rosé, you're gonna have pink, orange, and you're gonna have like orange. So those are basically the terms that you use when you wanna describe the color. Some notes that I have about the color is, you want to describe the color, like if it's intense, and then the actual color, and then you want to talk about possible causes of that color, right? So like, if you say wine is pale, why is it pale? So I think when you start making conclusions like that, that helps you kind of do a blind tasting and determine like what the wine could actually be in the long run. So you always want to think about like what you said, and then think about like the cause of why it's like that. Lastly, when you're looking at colors, you want to look at the rim. So I don't have any wine in my glass right now, but imagine if there's wine in this glass, and then when you look at it, around the edges of it, while it's in the glass, around the edge, that's called the rim, and it might be a different color than the actual color that's in the center. And so if the rim, if it has a rim that's a different color, you want to note that, yes or no, first of all, right? And then if yes, what color is that rim? Is it like a garnet? Is it like a tawny? Is it lighter? Sometimes you might get like a lighter rim for some reason, because maybe, like I said, again, it could be from a colder region. It could be carbonic maceration or something like that. So those are the 3 things that you want to look at when you're looking at the color. Any questions about the color, or anybody want to add anything about the color? No? No? All right. So let's go on to the nose. So that's the next thing in the systematic way of evaluating wine, is you want to look at you want to smell the nose, right? So you want to swirl the wine and then you want to smell it. And it's just like the color. You want to know if it's intense. Well, let's start off with if it's light, if it's medium, or if it's pronounced, right? So light means like it's kind of faint. You can't really smell anything. Like a Pinot Grigio to me is a very light, usually varietal, where you don't have too much intense flavors, aromas that come out. Is it medium? Medium, I would say, it's like your typical wines. Like you get some fruit flavors, you get some flowers, or is it pronounced? Pronounced would be very like aromatic wines that have this very distinct aroma, like Moscato. Muscat, that grape is very pronounced. Like you definitely smell grapes, you definitely smell honeysuckle. You can pretty much identify that no matter what. Gewürztraminer, you get that spiciness. It has very pronounced aromas. Can anybody think of a red wine that would be pronounced or aromatic? Let me unmute everybody. Or did everybody unmute themselves? Okay. So I can't think of one right now.
Like Grenache, I'd normally get like red currants and spice or florality on it, especially when it comes to the New World.
Nice. And it is very distinctive. You get that red rose too in Grenache.
Yeah.
And then that spicy. Thank you. So after you notice the intensity of the flavors or the aromas, you want to identify like the aroma characteristics, right? So we're talking about primary, secondary, and tertiary. I hate that word. Everybody knows I hate that word. Tertiary aromas, right? So your primary aromas are going to be the aromas that you actually get from like the fruit, from like the wine itself, right? So that means like after you fermented and well, even before you fermented, right? Like if you just took the grapes and you smelled the grapes, like they're different flavor profiles. Like Sauvignon Blanc is very herbaceous, right? Citrus. Rye, it's gonna have this black pepper. It's gonna smell like plums, right? So those are the primary, the flowers, the fruit, the things that you get from the actual grapes. Secondary aromas are during the fermentation process. So like if you have any contact with the leaves, it just may be the way that it might be aged. But not aged, but like if you use stainless steel or if you use oak barrels, because aged, like I said, once the wine is aged, that's gonna be your tertiary flavor. Somebody say the word, I hate that word, tertiary flavors, right? So those are the flavors that you're gonna get after you age a wine, and maybe it's aged in an oak barrel, maybe it's aged in a bottle, but it's gonna be like the mushrooms. It's gonna be like maybe the wet floor, things that you get after you've like made the wine and it's aged a little bit and it's developed. So I like to call them the primary, the secondary, and then the third level flavors. So when you talk about the nose of the wine, I always like to put things in categories, right? So you have flowers, you have fruit, you have things from the earth, and then you have non-flower and fruit categories. Those are my own personal categories that I made up just to help me like box it all in. But then once you pick a category, so like let's say you smell flower in this wine, right? So if I said, oh man, I smell flower, like we talked about Grenache, right? And then I might say, oh, it smells like roses, right? So then after I say it smells like roses, that's the noun. So you go the category, then you go the noun, and then I have to give it an adjective, right? If I smell roses, what kind of roses are these? Are they dried roses? Are they fresh roses? And then that helps you kind of just break down the aromas even further. So any questions about that?
No questions, but I want to add something as well on the nose.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So it's not just yeah, it's not just picking up aromas or flavor profile. That's also when you can pick up a faulty wine, you know, on the nose.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, yes. So people, they tend to forget that. So that's when you can pick up a faulty wine. When you start smelling like wet cardboard, or when the wine is smelling maybe dusty or stale, you know.
Right, and I heard a cool term the other day. It was like, they called it faults and features, right? So sometimes what somebody considers a fault, it could actually be a feature in the wine, right? So for example, for me, I always say, oh, I hate French wines because they smell like just wet florist floor. They smell like earth to me, right? But that could be a feature or it could be a fault, depending on, like, it's not necessarily a fault, but it's a feature, right? But then if you had wet cardboard, that would be like a fault, because then it would probably mean that you had TCA in your wine.
Yeah, but not everyone can identify a faulty wine, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I think fault, so like once you do smell the fault, decide if it's actually a fault or if it's actually a feature in the wine. Okay, so we had a question through the text message about the color, so we're just gonna go back and revisit the color. So Andrea said she wanted to know if there's a difference between salmon and pink orange for rosé. So I thought that salmon was probably like pink orange. Does anybody have anything different that they would say when you talk about the color of a rosé? No? I like my rosé that pink orange color though, personally. But yeah, I think salmon and pink orange, we could all agree that that's pretty much the same color.
Yeah.
Any questions about the color or the nose of the wine? No? Okay, so then let's move on to the palate, right? So the palate is actually how this wine tastes and how it feels on your tongue, right? And so this is where you're gonna determine if there's any sweetness in the wine. And then when you determine if there's any sweetness, you use terms like, okay, the wine is dry, it's off dry, it's medium, or it's sweet, right? So if it's dry, that means that there's absolutely no residual sugar. It might be fruity, but that's not the same thing as sweetness. And I know a lot of people usually, they'll say, oh, I want a sweet red wine. And I'm like, okay, you want a port? And they're like, no, I don't want a port. I don't want anything that sweet. And I'm like, okay, no, you just want a fruit-forward red wine. So there's definitely a difference between something that's fruity and something that's sweet. So dry means there's no residual sugars. Off dry means that there could be a little bit of residual sugars, maybe like 1%. And so it's not dry, but it's not sweet at all. And then medium means that there's a little bit more residual sugar and it's going to be like, it's going to be sweet. I'm trying to think of, maybe there's this grape called, what is it called? Symphony. That's actually the name of the grape. It was made in America. But anyway, it's an off-dry to medium sweet wine. So it's not super, super sweet, but there is some residual sugar in there, and it's not as sweet as like a dessert wine. So like a dessert wine, Chateau de Kip, that's gonna be sweet. What's the one that they make at Gros Constantia?
Vin de Constance.
Yes, that's going to be sweet. So yeah, Moscato, I would call Moscato, if it's not made in a dessert style, if it's just made like regularly fermented, I would call that medium and not necessarily sweet. Sweet to me would be like your dessert wines, your ports, things like that. Does anybody disagree or agree?
Noble late harvest might fall into that category too.
Sweet, yes. I think late harvest would definitely.
True. Yeah.
Even though we were taking the test the other day, the practice test, and I thought one of the questions was a late harvest can be dry, medium, and sweet.
It depends on the style. Yeah. It depends on the style of wine that it's produced in. So you can have white grape varietals that are subjected to botrytis to produce noble late harvest wines, but they can also be fermented dry. So it depends entirely on the style. So the varietal itself is not necessarily an indication of the amount of sugar in the wine.
Okay, so it's still this style that it's late harvest. So if it's botrytis, more than likely it's definitely going to be sweet. Okay, let me see, there's some, Teresa, let's see. Wouldn't that also affect the viscosity of the wine and the legs? Yes, it definitely would affect the viscosity and the legs of the wine, so the sweetness level. The alcohol level would also affect that too. The sweetness level definitely is gonna make it, gonna have less viscosity, so it's gonna have definitely longer, slower dripping legs because of the sugar. But yes, it does affect the legs. So the sweetness. And then the next thing you want to talk about is the acidity in the wine, right? And so remember, when we're talking about these things, you always want to describe what it is with the description, and then you always want to think about a possible cause. So, because that helps you determine if you're doing a blind tasting, like what grape it is. But the acidity in the wine, right? So the acidity in the wine, you measure it low, medium, and high. Low acidity means that, you know, acidity, you feel that on the sides of your tongue for the most part, right? So like you drink a wine, and if you really get this tingling in the side of your tongue, then it's very, very acidic, right? If you don't feel any tingle on the side of your tongue, then you could probably say that the acidity is low. If you could feel it somewhat, then you can say, okay, it's medium. But acidity is the backbone for white wines. And yeah, so you would say it's low, medium, or high. High acidic wines usually are Sauvignon Blancs. A lot of wines from Germany, a lot of wines from colder regions tend to have very, very high acidity. So yes. Any comments about acidity? Anybody want to add anything? So Eric says, what's the difference between Cabernet Sauvignon and Cab Merlot and Cab Shiraz wines? Okay, so Cabernet Sauvignon is the name of the grape, right? Merlot is the name of the grape. Shiraz is the name of the grape. So if you just have one that's Cabernet Sauvignon all by itself, that's a single varietal wine. If you have a Cab Merlot, that means that they blended the two. They blended the Merlot grape juice and they blended the Cabernet Sauvignon grape juice. Cab Shiraz is the same thing, so it's a blend. So those last two would be blends. That's the only difference. Besides, they're just totally different grapes. All right. So tannins. Any questions about acidity? Then we'll move on to the tannin. So this is all when you're describing the taste of the wine, or the characteristic, the systematic approach. And there's actually this little guide that they give you when you start talking about it. I don't know if you guys can see that. So then you start talking about the alcohol level in the wines, right? So you said the alcohol is low, medium, or high. And basically you can tell the alcohol level by how it burns in your chest. Like usually if it's a very alcoholic wine, when it goes into your chest, it'll feel warm, kind of like cognac, right? Because cognac obviously is very high. We have a question about acidity. So Andrea said, do red wines have acidity? Yes, they do. Sometimes people can mistake, we're just gonna backtrack a little bit and go back to acidity. Sometimes people will mistake acidity in red wines for the tannins, but red wines definitely have acidity as well. And it's different than the tannins that are gonna be in the red wine. Trying to think of a red wine that, Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir is a red wine that low in tannins, but high in acidity, especially Pinots that come from like cooler regions. So they're gonna have high acidity, low tannins.
Sangiovese as well.
Sangiovese as well, yep. And that's why Sangiovese Chianti is so good with like spaghetti. It's like a classic pairing because you have that acidity in the tomato juice and the tomato sauce, and the acidity in the Sangiovese. Very good one. Okay, so speaking of tannins, let's talk about tannins. We also want to identify the tannin levels in a wine. Now, white wine won't have any tannins usually because you get the tannins from the skin of the grapes and you don't leave white wine in contact with the skins. So to measure the tannins, you say, are they low, medium, or high? So the tannins, you feel the tannins probably like on the back of the tongue, the mid palate of the tongue, makes your mouth feel dry. Some people say bitter. Yeah, but the tannins, I love tannins in red wine. Tannins are like the backbone of red wine. So I'm trying to think of a very old, like Barolo. Barolo is a wine that's very high in tannins, and that's why you have to let it age for so long. A lot of Bordeaux wines are high in tannins, and that's why they age for so long, because as a wine ages, tannins start to decrease. The filling of those tannins start to decrease. Anybody want to add anything else about the tannins in red wine? No? Okay.
I don't know if you said this, but it also kind of it makes your mouth feel a little dry, right?
Yep. It makes your mouth feel, yeah, it can make your mouth feel very dry too.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I did talk about that. Anything else, Michelle?
Nope.
Nope. Can anybody name any wines that are like high in tannins?
Cab Sav, Syrah.
Syrah, Cab Sav, yes. Very good. So we talked about the alcohol level, talked about the tannins, the acidity, the sweetness. Now let's talk about the body, right? So the body is how the wine feels in your mouth. A way that I heard to explain this, and I've been explaining it like this for years, is think about milk, right? So, and hopefully I don't explain this in a too American way, but like in America you have skim milk, right? Which is like almost 0% fat milk. It's almost like watered down milk. And then you have like 2% milk, right? It has a little bit more fat in the milk, has a little bit more body. And then you have like whole milk. And then that whole milk is like, it's like fresh full cream milk, right? And it feels very heavy on your tongue and it coats your tongue. So that's how I kind of think about wine when I think about the body of the wine, right? Like you'll have a light bodied wine, like a Pinot Noir, for example, that's very light, kind of just dances around your tongue. There you go. And then you have a medium bodied wine that would be something like maybe a Merlot that has a little bit more tannins than the Pinot Noir, a little bit heavier on your tongue. And then you have something like a Shiraz or a Syrah that has like a lot of body. It's full body, so it's very full in your mouth. So I think that's the way that I explain body. Anybody else have any tips? No. Okay. So then you talk about, after the body, you talk about the flavor intensity, right? So is it light, is it medium, or is it pronounced flavors? I think that this one for me is the hardest one, because it depends on, if you really like a wine, you might say, oh, well, this wine, the flavor is more intense than not, right? But I think the flavor intensity is just like, how long does it like actually, I don't know, can somebody explain flavor intensity? Oh, all right, so I'll try it again. So like flavor intensity, I'm trying to think of one for me. For example, Pinot Grigio. Pinot Grigio, I don't know if you guys picked this up. I dislike Pinot Grigio, right? Because the flavor intensity is not very, it's not very flavorful. You know, you drink it and it's not, you can't really taste anything. Even like, there's one from Spain. Is it Albarino? Albarino sometimes can just taste like pool water to me. No, it's not Albarino. I like Albarino. It's the one from Portugal. I can't think of the name of it, but it doesn't have
Verdelho.
Yes, Verdelho. It doesn't have a lot of flavor to me. Like you drink it and it's like, what are you drinking it for? So the flavor intensity is very light. Something like Pinot Noir, the flavor intensity to me is medium. Whereas if you have a Zinfandel from, well, let's not do Zinfandel. Let's just say Cabernet Sauvignon. The flavor is usually very intense. There you can identify it easily. flavor characteristics. So we talked about that earlier when we talked about the aroma characteristics. So again, you're going to have your primary, your secondary, and your tertiary flavor characteristics. And these are just the flavors that develop in the bottle over time. The initial flavors, the fruit flavors, the flower flavors, the primary flavors, the secondary flavors that you have, whether it were in oak or stainless steel, and then the tertiary one, flavors that it gets after aging. So like sometimes it might be like a caramelized flavors or like a cooked fruit type flavor for your aged wines. And then lastly, it's going to be the finish. So the finish is, okay, so the finish is after you taste the wine and you swallow the wine, it's how long the wine actually lingers in your tongue and in the back of your mouth after you actually swallow the wine. And you know, some wines will have a really short, quick finish, some will have a medium finish, and then really, really quality wines will have a very long finish. So these are all the things that you want to look at. The appearance of the wine, the nose, and then the palate. And then after all of that, that's when you want to make a final conclusion. And your final conclusion is just about the quality of the wine. And remember, this isn't like a personal judgment. This is basically like you take all of these things, right? And then you say, is it poor, acceptable, good, very good, or outstanding? So for example, if you had a white wine and it was pale in color, let's say the color was like a lemon color, it was pale in color, the nose was light, the aroma characteristics, you could barely, you know, maybe they were simple. It just smelled like peaches, right? Like white peaches. And then there was no secondary, there was no tertiary. And then let's just say if we're off dry, right? And then you said the acidity was low. The tannin was low, the alcohol was low, everything was low, then you would probably say that was a poor wine. If you gave everything like a medium for the most part, medium acidity, medium tannins, medium alcohol, medium body, then you probably say that that wine was acceptable, maybe some good, right? But then if it were complex and it had like secondary aromas, tertiary aromas, it had like pronounced intensity or medium intensity, that's when you start saying very good or outstanding. So for it to be outstanding or very good, you pretty much have to have like just not be average, have more pronounced flavors and aromas. So that's the whole grid of tasty wine that we went through. And that's in the book. So like that's something that you would need to know for the test or for your WSET too. Any questions? No? All right, well, I think that concludes our study session. So we're just gonna end. I'm gonna give you 30 minutes of your life back if you guys don't have any questions or nobody has anything to add about that.
Not about the study group, but two things. Could I have Joseph's contact details, find out where I could find his wines from? And are we meeting on Thursday?
Yes, we are meeting on Thursday. I will give you Joseph's contact information. Do you have my email? Can you email me, or I could email you if you give me your email address? If you type your email in the comments, message me, I will connect you guys. And awesome. Then and just let me know if you want to be connected through WhatsApp or through email, because I think he does a lot of business through WhatsApp. Okay. And yes, we are meeting on Thursday. So now we're going to start getting into like actual grape varietals, right? So like I said, we're following the WSET book, number 2. And so the first grape varietal that we're going to do is Zinfandel. Probably because I'm from California, so Zinfandel is close to my heart. So I actually have a winemaker from California who's going to join us, and he's going to do a master class all about Zinfandel, and then just study Zinfandel after that. So that'll be Thursday.
Great.
Yes.
Fabulous.
So I will see you guys all on Thursday. I will get you Joseph's contact information. Jess, did you send me an email with a text message with your phone number or your email address? And thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
That was a great class. Thank you.
Take care. Stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Adora.